FluentCast. Real English, real conversations, real confidence. This is FluentCast.
Hello, and welcome back to FluentCast, the podcast where we explore the intersection of language, culture, and the world we live in. I'm your host, Diego, and before we dive into today's topic, if you are enjoying our episodes and want to keep improving your English through real-world discussions, make sure to hit that subscribe button on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or wherever you listen. It really helps us grow our community. Okay, so today we are talking about something I get asked about a lot. Business English. Not the textbook version, the real version. The version you need when you are on a call with a client in Germany, writing an email to a supplier in Japan, and your manager sends you a message that says, "Let's circle back on this." And you have absolutely no idea what that means. That version. And to talk about it, I brought someone who lives this every single day. She started English lessons with me about 3 years ago from basically zero, and today she works in a multinational manufacturing company, handling business-to-business sale and support, communicating with clients and partners across multiple countries in English every single day. Andrea Torres, welcome to FluentCast.
Hi, Diego. Hi, everyone. It's a bit weird being on the podcast side of things. I'm usually the one listening.
You've earned it. So, let me start with a question that I always ask guests who've gone through this transition. What was the moment you realized, okay, this is real, I actually use English for work now?
Oh, I know exactly when it was. It was my first international call. My manager told me the day before, "Andrea, tomorrow you're going to lead the call with the client in Germany." And I think I didn't sleep that night. I had my notes, I had everything written down. And then the call started and the guy said, "Let's jump right in." And I froze for a second. Because in my head I was thinking, jump? Jump where?
I can imagine the confusion. Okay, so let's jump right in. For everyone listening, this is one of those expressions that sounds strange if you translate it literally. Jump right in just means let's start immediately without wasting time. It has nothing to do with physically jumping. But if you've never heard it before, in a high-pressure moment, your brain goes to the literal image first.
Exactly. And that was the thing. I knew English. I had studied, I had practiced, but business English has its own language inside the language. It took me a while to understand that.
That's actually the perfect way to put it. Business English is almost a dialect, let's say. It has expressions, structures, and rhythms that you don't learn from a textbook. Andrea, what are the ones that tripped you up the most in the beginning?
Oh, okay, so the big one for me was, "Let's take this offline." I heard this in a meeting and I genuinely thought, offline? Like, are we losing internet connection? Is something wrong? But no, it means this conversation is too detailed for this meeting. Let's talk separately, just the two of us.
Take it offline, which is ironic because half the time the offline conversation also happens online in a separate message. But yes, take it offline means let's not discuss this in front of everyone right now. It is actually a polite way of saying this is getting complicated, let's handle it privately.
And then there's let's circle back, which I now use all the time. But in the beginning, I thought, circle back? Circle back to where?
Circle back means let's return to this topic later. Usually in a meeting when something comes up that you can't resolve that moment immediately, let's circle back is quite used. You could say, let's circle back to this at the end of the call, or let me circle back with you by Friday. It is one of those expressions that is everywhere in corporate English. Once you hear it, you can't unhear it.
It's everywhere. And once I learned it, I started noticing all of them. Move the needle, get the ball rolling, on the same page. They're all metaphors. But nobody explains that. You're just supposed to absorb them.
Which is exactly why we are talking about it today. Because for a listener who is preparing to enter an international work environment, or who is already in one and is still catching up, these are not optional. These are the words your colleagues use when they are being casual and efficient. And if you don't know them, you can seem lost even when your English is technically very good. Okay, now I want to talk about something that I think every Brazilian professional has experienced at some point. The moment when your Portuguese brain takes over and produces something in English that doesn't quite work the way you intended. Andrea, do you have a story?
I have several. Okay. The one I will never forget. I was writing an email to a client, a very important client, and I wanted to say that we were going to fix the problem soon. And I wrote, we will give a look at the issue. Because in Portuguese we say, vou dar uma olhada. And I translated it word for word. Dar uma olhada. Give a look.
Oh no, you didn't.
And my manager saw it before I sent it, thank God. And she said, Andrea, we don't give a look in English. We take a look. And I was like, take? Take a look? Really?
And this is actually a beautiful example of what linguists call a false construction. Not a false cognate, but a false translation. In Portuguese, the verb used is to give. In Portuguese, dar. But in English, the verb that goes with look is take. You take a look. You don't give one. The logic is different, and there is no rule that explains it. You just have to know it.
And I think the email one is where I made the most mistakes in the beginning. Because in a call, things move fast. You can recover. But in an email, it's there. It's written. It stays.
So tell me, how did your approach to emails change it over time?
A lot. In the beginning, I wrote emails like I was writing in Portuguese. Very warm, a lot of context, explaining everything. And I noticed that the responses from international clients were much shorter, much more direct. And I felt like, are they annoyed with me? Did I say something wrong? But no, that's just the style. In a business email in English, especially in a B2B context, you get to the point. You say what you need, you say what happens next, and you stop.
That is a really important cultural shift, and it goes beyond language. For instance, Brazilian communication, and this isn't a criticism, just a difference, tends to be warmer, more relational, more contextual before getting to the point. Anglo-Saxon business culture, especially in writing, tends to be much more direct. Neither is wrong, but if you don't know the difference, your emails can read as unprofessional or theirs can read as rude.
Exactly. And once I understood it as a cultural thing, not a language thing, it became much easier to adapt.
Let's talk about false cognates for a second, because this is one that trips up a lot of learners, and it trips up advanced speakers just as much beginners. Andrea, do you have a false cognate that cost you a difficult moment?
Yes, pretend. In Portuguese, pretender means to intend, to plan to do something. So I was in a meeting and I said, we pretend to deliver the order by Friday. And everyone on the call went quiet for a second. And I didn't understand why.
Because in English, pretend means to fake something, to act as if something is true when it isn't. So what you said was, effectively was, we are going to fake delivering the order by Friday.
Which is the opposite of what I meant. I meant we intend to deliver. The word I needed was intend. Or even simpler, we plan to deliver by Friday. And I remember my face going red. But the client was actually very kind about it. They understood from context.
And that is actually the other lesson here. Communication is generous. People want to understand you. They fill in the gaps. But there are words where the gap is big enough to create real confusion. Pretend is one, and realize is another one, especially for Portuguese speakers. Realizar in Portuguese means carry out or accomplish something. In English, realize means to become aware of something. There are so many words that confuse people, not only English, Portuguese, but Spanish, English, German, and English. It's always a situation where you need to learn really the word, the meaning of the word in English, not to confuse with the meaning of the word in your own language. I always tell my students, if a word is similar enough to your language, don't go assuming that the meaning is the same. It might be, of course, but it's better to check the dictionary.
I've done that many times.
One more thing I want to explore before we close, because I think this is something that surprises a lot of people when they first enter an international work environment. Andrea, in your daily work, tell me, when you are on a call or in a meeting, how often is there actually a native English speaker in the room?
Honestly, almost never. In most of my calls, it's me, Brazilian, talking to someone in Germany, or someone in India, or someone in South Korea. And we're all speaking English, but nobody grew up speaking it. We're all figuring it out together.
And this is something I think it's really underappreciated. The majority of English communication in the world today happens between non-native speakers, not between a native and a learner, but between a Brazilian, for example, and a German, or an Indian and a Japanese, all using English as a shared tool. Linguists actually have a term for this. English is a lingua franca. A lingua franca is just a common language that people with different mother tongues agree to use to communicate. And today, English is the world's lingua franca, which means Andrea, in her day-to-day calls, is actually representing the majority of how English is used on this planet.
I never thought about it that way, but it's true. And actually, once I understood that, I relaxed a lot. Because I used to feel like I was the only imperfect one in the room. And then I started noticing my German colleague says, I will give you a feedback instead of I will give you feedback. No A. Because in German, you can say it that way. My colleague from India sometimes puts the verb at the end of the sentence in a way that's very natural in Hindi but sounds unusual in English. And we all understand each other perfectly.
Right. And I will give you a feedback that is actually a very common German interference, because in German, the word for feedback, Rückmeldung, is a countable noun. You can say eine Rückmeldung, one feedback. So the article slips in naturally. In English, feedback is uncountable. You can't say a feedback or two feedbacks. You just say feedback or some feedback. But when you know where the mistake is coming from, it stops feeling like a mistake and starts feeling like a person, a whole other language leaking through.
That's exactly it. And honestly, the most important skill I've developed isn't vocabulary or grammar, it's patience and listening carefully. Because when you're on a call with 5 people from 5 different countries, you're not just decoding English, you're decoding 5 different versions of English at the same time. And the ones who are best at it are the ones who listen generously. They try to understand what you mean, not just what you said.
Listen generously. I'm writing that down for real. That might be the best advice anyone has ever given on this podcast. Andrea, last question. For someone who is listening right now, maybe they are exactly where you were 3 years ago. They have some English, they are about to step into an international work environment, and they are terrified. What is the one thing you would tell them?
I'd say, don't try to be perfect. The goal isn't to sound like a native speaker. The goal is to be understood and to understand. And the best thing that happened to me was making mistakes in front of real people in real situations and surviving it. You survive it. And every time you do, you get a little less scared.
That is the whole show, honestly. Right there.
I've been listening for a while. What can I say?
Andrea, thank you so much for being here. This was genuinely one of my favorite conversations on FluentCast.
Thank you for having me, Diego. And for everyone listening, keep going. It's worth it.
And if this episode resonated with you, share it. One person, someone who is navigating the same world Andrea just described. It makes a real difference for us. I'm Diego, and this was FluentCast. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you next Monday. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
FluentCast is a production of Fluent English Academy. To learn English in a natural and practical way, visit www.fluentenglishacademy.com.br.